Hi, friend, and welcome back to the Grace-Filled Mom podcast. I'm really glad you're here today. This episode is for a mom who is waiting on God, and if she's honest, the waiting is harder than she expected it to be. You've prayed, you've asked God for direction, you've tried to be patient, but time keeps passing, and the answer you're hoping for hasn't come yet. If you found yourself thinking, I trust God, I just wish He would move faster, this episode is for you. Today, we're talking about grace for the mom waiting on God and struggling with the wait, and how God meets us not just at the answer, but in the waiting itself. Waiting is one of the hardest parts of faith, especially in motherhood. We wait for clarity. We wait for healing, decisions, change, growth in our children, resolution in situations we can't control. And waiting can feel especially heavy when we don't know how long the wait will last. It's not just about the absence of answers. It's the uncertainty that wears us down. And what makes waiting especially hard is that life doesn't pause while we wait. We're still showing up for our kids, still making decisions, still carrying responsibility. Waiting doesn't mean we get to stop living. It means we're living without resolution. That is why waiting can feel lonely. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like no one quite understands the tension you're carrying inside. You're moving forward externally while internally asking God, when or what now? If that resonates with you, I want you to know you're not weak for feeling that way. You're human. And God meets us in that tension, not after it disappears. One verse I return to often in waiting seasons is Isaiah 40:31. Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. What stands out to me is that this verse doesn't say waiting costs us strength. It says waiting renews it. And that's very important. It almost feels counterintuitive because waiting often feels exhausting. But scripture reminds us that waiting with God is different than waiting alone. Another verse that has spoken to me deeply in waiting seasons is Psalms 27:14. Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart, and wait for the Lord. I love this verse. I love it because this verse doesn't pretend waiting is easy. It tells us to take heart, which implies that our hearts may feel tired, discouraged, or worn down while we wait. Scripture doesn't shame us for struggling in the waiting. Instead, it encourages us to stay connected to God in it, to let Him strengthen us as we wait, rather than demanding strength from ourselves. I've walked through seasons where I wanted God to answer quickly, not because I was impatient, which I can be, but because the weight of not knowing felt so heavy. I didn't need everything solved. I just needed something to feel settled. And in those seasons, I learned that waiting doesn't mean God is inactive. Often, it means He's working in ways I can't see yet, both around me and within me. I've told several people before, it was explained to me one time, and I love this illustration, that when we can't see God working, He's behind the scenes. He's the one that doesn't necessarily get the credit for being out front. He's behind the scenes doing all of the work that needs to be done in order to answer that prayer that I've prayed, in order to work out the situation that I'm in order to fulfill that purpose that is meant for my life or my children's lives. So waiting has a way of exposing what we're leaning on most. And as moms, waiting often looks very practical. It looks like waiting for a child to grow emotionally, waiting for a situation to resolve, waiting for clarity about a decision that affects your family. And the hard part is that while we wait, we still have to respond wisely, lovingly, and faithfully without knowing how things will turn out. That is where I've learned that waiting isn't passive. It's active trust. And when you think about it that way, it changes your whole perspective. It's choosing not to panic, choosing not to rush ahead, choosing not to assume that silence means God is absent. Waiting shows us whether we're leaning on control or leaning on God. So why is waiting so uncomfortable? Waiting is uncomfortable because it removes our sense of control. And I like to be in control. It forces us to sit with uncertainty. It stretches our trust beyond our timeline. As moms, we are used to fixing, planning, anticipating, and responding. Waiting asks us to loosen our grip, and that can feel very vulnerable. Sometimes the hardest part of waiting isn't trusting God, it's releasing our timeline. In the strength chapter of Grace-Filled Motherhood, I talk about how God's strength often meets us when we're weak, not after we've figured things out. Think about that for a minute. When God meets you where you're weak, then He gets the honor and the glory when we do something that there is no way that we could do on our own. In our weakness, that's where His strength is strong. That touches me to know that it's okay to be weak in certain areas. It's okay that we're not strong in every single thing. That's okay, because God is going to come along behind us, beside us, with us, in front of us, to help us in our weakness. And He's going to give us that strength that we need. So waiting highlights our weaknesses, but that's exactly where God's strength is made visible. It's just, to me, that is so cool. God isn't asking us to wait perfectly. He's asking us to wait with Him. So here's a reframe that has helped me. What if waiting isn't a pause in the story, but an important part of it? That That changes everything, doesn't it? Waiting can deepen trust. It can refine our motives, and it can also prepare us for what comes next. I think that's the most important one. You have no idea what's going to be around the bend, what's coming in your future for you or your children. So, what if this waiting period is God preparing you to be able to handle what's ahead because He already knows? So, sometimes God delays answers not to withhold good things, but to shape us so we're ready to receive them. Here's a question that you can just sit with this week. What is the waiting in my life revealing about what I'm trusting most right now? Is it revealing a desire for certainty, for relief, for control? Or is God inviting you to deepen your trust, not by changing the situation yet, but by changing what you're leaning on inside of it? There's no right or wrong answer here, just honesty. God can work with honesty far more than pressure. Let me give you a little bit of encouragement for today if you need that. If you're waiting and struggling, it doesn't mean your faith is weak. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. And it doesn't mean God has forgotten you. Waiting is not wasted when it's placed in God's hands. Even on days when waiting feels heavy, God is still present, still attentive, and still working. Isaiah 40:31 doesn't promise that waiting will be easy. It promises that God will meet us in it. Renewed strength doesn't always look like excitement or clarity. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Sometimes it looks like showing up again tomorrow, and that still counts. One day you may look back and realize that the waiting season you struggled through was where your faith deepened, your trust mattered, and your dependence on God grew stronger than you imagined. Waiting doesn't delay God's plan. It often prepares us for it. As we close today, I want to leave you with this encouragement. You don't have to enjoy the waiting to be faithful in it. You don't have to feel calm, confident, or resolved. You just have to keep bringing your real heart honestly and consistently before God. If you're waiting on an answer, direction, or change right now, know this. God is not distant. He is not passive. And He is not wasting this season. Even here, even now, He is strengthening you in ways that you may not recognize yet. Next week, we'll talk about grace for the mom overthinking every decision and how God's wisdom brings clarity when our thoughts feel tangled and heavy. Thank you for spending time with me today. Even in the waiting, you are being held, guided, and strengthened, one faithful day at a time. I'll see you next week.